everybody. Not a hate monger. More of a hate stylist, if you will. Thank you very much.
Thank him very much.
Hi.
Hi.
Speaking of stylist, I got a haircut, and I'm Mark.
And he's looking pretty good, and I'm Tom.
Thank you. And
You're welcome.
thank you.
And you're welcome.
And we're
The Cinemaniacs. We can take a little breath. 7. Only 7.
Nothing on the back.
Can you imagine that?
No flippies today.
Nothing up my sleeve.
And we've lost them already.
Although there is a movie about magic.
Is there now?
So, and that wasn't done with green screen or editing.
No. We're not highfalutin like that.
That's
here.
right.
Let's jump in so then we can talk about our weekends afterwards because
Okay.
we both were out of state.
Yep, that's true.
Adventures. Would you like to begin, or shall I?
I'll be happy to
If you would.
We could rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock if you want to. But in any event, what are you going to do when the entire universe is up for grabs and there's this bad guy in really like same kind of non-color? It's not color. The curtains back there, those aren't really colors. White and black aren't really colors. But there's a guy who likes to dress in black, so he's probably a bad guy. But you got a good guy after him, along with a little sidekick kid. They want to defend everything, but the bad guy, Walter happens to be his name, not my son, wants to basically get rid of everything that there can possibly be. The whole focus of it all for the gunslinger and the walking dude would happen to be the Dark Tower.
No Showtime treat to equal the crisp, delicious flavor of hot popcorn that's bathed in real melted butter.
He rips his heart out of his chest and he jams it down people's throats.
That's how he kills. Yeah, exactly.
And then he takes it
right.
back and puts it back in, like Bruce Lee before he dies. This is based on a series of books by Stephen King, which I've never read, but I know exist.
Okay.
And have a fan base who I'm sure are just
I'm a
thrilled with the film
huge
adaptation.
fan of one of them.
And I went in.
All of them.
I went in knowing nothing more than the trailers showed me, which was saucy gunplay and end of the world apocalypse and a kid.
Right.
So I didn't love this all that much. I mean, I thought it was okay, but it felt. I can't think specifically of what I want to say here, but it reminded me of other films I've seen over the years, structurally in terms of there's a kid who has a fantasy hero, and that fantasy hero becomes real.
Everybody thinks the kid's crazy.
Takes the kid on adventures, and in the end, well, I don't want to give away the end, but the end is like a lot of other movies I've seen that are like this. And the only movie I could think of was Cloak and Dagger, which is not a great movie and not a terribly well-remembered movie.
Very few people. I love Cloak and Dagger.
That one popped up in my head. Jack Flack,
That's
Henry Thomas and Dabney Coleman. So that made me think of that. I thought elements of this were really silly or cheesy. The whole McConaughey is the man in black, not Johnny Cash, who's like this weird, long fingernailed, wizardy guy who talks funny and is a smooth operator. And I do like how he Darren Browns people to death. He's just like Andrew did. That was kind of cool. He'd walk by, stop breathing. That was kind of cool.
Okay.
But otherwise, he seemed really cheesy to me. Some of the thing of Elba's character and his father, who was Dennis Haysbert, who's done some fine work. Repeating this mantra, that seemed kind of silly to me, and when he says it again, it just seemed cheesy to me. Maybe means more if you read the books and are into those.
It does, yeah.
Effects I thought were good. Photography very good. Score was pretty good and powerful.
Right.
But I just was not. I didn't get into this for whatever reason. Now I very much look forward into hearing what you have to say about this because. Again, I know it was a series of books. Is this movie based on a book? Is it based on the series? Is it inspired by the series? Is it what?
And I forget how many books there were. It's like 7 or 9 of them. But it's this huge pantheon and this gigantic world that King created that, for the most part, I really loved. Now, as a filmmaker and as a teacher, I do my best, particularly in my screenwriting class. I actually, in my year-long screenwriting class, we spend a couple of weeks looking at movies based on books and examining how you've got to create a movie if you're writing the screenplay that doesn't rely on the books. It drives me nuts when I hear people coming out of the theater and explaining, oh well, it was this way in the book. Well, then the movie failed.
Yeah, I didn't read the book.
And so I'm looking at. I came into this and I think I'm pretty able to differentiate between things. 2 sides of me. One, as a person who didn't know anything about the books, kind of like yourself. And I can very much see that it's a little confusing, that some of the lines seem overwrought. As somebody who wouldn't be familiar with the story, I thought the whole, I thought the machinations of it. Here's this guy who claims to be the devil, or everybody says is the devil. Well, why does he need a bunch of team with computers trying to find everything?
That is odd. The high-tech space station, otherworld thing seemed a little weird.
That was just very, very strange, and I don't recall that has anything to do with the books. I was a huge fan. In fact, the second book is my second favorite book I've ever read. The first is Kill a Mockingbird. But The Drawing of the Three, Stephen King's The Drawing of the Three, is my second favorite. I read very, very slowly. I read that one in like a day, just ate it up. And so I think I can speak with some authority over the first half of these. This movie seems to merge 3 or 4 of the pantheon together. And so ultimately, as somebody who is familiar with the story and likes the story, I thought it had moments of brilliance where it's like, wow, that's just so perfect. And also moments of just silliness, and that it was ultimately dissatisfying. How can you take something that is 9 books long and make it into a 2-hour movie?
Well, I had heard originally that it was going to be like a Netflix series or something.
I thought that would have been great.
Movie, and now I hear maybe it will be a series again, so I have no idea.
Well, as you know, relative to the ending, maybe if they do a series, they'll have to start over again, obviously, because difficult, although you could revive some of the characters that we lost in this story. So as a real fan of the series, I thought this could have been done really well in 3 movies, all of the books and everything, because there's some silly stuff. But I thought McConaughey, in knowing who this evil character is, I thought he did a good job 80% of the time, and I thought the other 20% he really overchewed the scenery, and was silly. I like to think that I am not racist in any way, shape, or form, but when this first came out, and I saw that Roland was black, I'm like, why? Why did we just change it to be politically correct? And Idris Elba was terrific. He just encapsulated, I thought, everything about Roland that I read about in the books. So I ended up loving him. I liked McConaughey. I thought the kid was really good.
Oh yeah.
And so for me, as a fan of the story, I'm kind of so-so on it. I thought there were moments where it was like, wow, they just captured it. There is that mantra. And the whole story with Roland is he's this like magical knight in many respects of the gunslingers, and the gunslingers did all this, and they had this kind of, it's a blending of cordiality and learning how people are supposed to behave. Before you probably heard the term "the world moved on," and almost a religious mysticism, and so that comes from that. And so I think people who really like the books, when they hear that, enjoy it as I did. I didn't think how silly it probably sounded until you mentioned it, and I can see that. So I think in the long run, if you go to this, you're not familiar with the stories, I think you'll have a good enough time. It is a little kind of cheesy, and we've seen the story over and over again. So gosh, I guess ultimately, I'm not being real praising of this. I did ultimately like it, but as a huge fan of the series, I was disappointed too. So I give The Dark Tower a 6, maybe.
Are there any should these continue to be adapted from the books, are there any of the books that don't involve an end of the world scenario?
No, it's all about, in fact, the first book is entirely Roland following the man in black across a desert. Jake all of a sudden appears, as he did here, but it's that desert area where Jake appears, and that's all that happens, this entire book.
Because I think part of my being like, here we go again, is it seems terrible. It's the end of the world again. Right. The world hangs in the balance, which is every superhero movie. Right. So I was just like, okay, great. But I wonder if he'll stop.
To be fair to King, even, you have to remember that these were certainly not before superheroes.
Right.
But I think The Dark Tower came out in the 80s or the late.
It was quite a while ago.
Yeah. And so I don't think it was quite as cliche at the time. But yeah, all of the books continue and move on, and they lost a lot of really great characters. But I thought it was fitting enough as a single film. But so, unfortunately, disappointing one way or the other. Either you're really familiar with it, or you're not familiar with it, and it's kind of a.
I thought, upon reflection, I didn't love Elba in the role. I thought he was a little stiff or just not dynamic to me.
Okay.
And I also thought McConaughey was a little cheesy. And I wonder if they had swapped roles, it might have worked better for me.
When this first came out, when the books first came out, McConaughey was my idea for Roland.
I think
I always thought it should have been Eastwood, but Eastwood's far too old.
if you had a wheelchair-bound gunslinger, that would be fine.
Here we go.
Because if McConaughey, I think, can be serious, but also have a little bit of spirit to him, and Elba, I think, could have sold the Doom a lot better than McConaughey did, because
they're
you see
both
McConaughey's
terrific actors.
So I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks.
Yeah.
That was just me. Speaking of films that are uplifting and just a laugh a minute. We have
End of the World. We can say either one.
For some people, it was the end of the world. We have Catherine Bigelow's latest film based on actual events that occurred in this nation of ours many moons ago. What happens when crime and racial tension erupt into a firestorm of frenzy and violence? Well, you get a little film set in a town called Detroit. And I'm not bluffing in telling you that I didn't see this film. Over to you, Tom.
Okay, well, thanks, Mark. And we're back. Catherine Bigelow, what a terrific director. I went to see this, not just because she directed it, but primarily because she directed it. Had no idea. This is a lot like, I mentally consider this to be like a U.S. Dunkirk, because it's about an incident I had no idea had ever occurred. Mm-hmm. And assuming we can trust the movie, I'm sure the event actually happened, but this was just stunning. And I think she was a wonderful director to have either chosen this or to be chosen for this, because she brings an intensity. This was one of the most intense. And again, here's another film where I can't say I enjoyed it, because it's such an unpleasant topic, but presented with, it was just powerful and intense are the two words that I bring most to it. About these, you're introduced to a series of characters. I assume they're the real characters, not like an amalgam of the black community in Detroit, but just the oppression that is wrought on them during this social uprising. They're standing up for their rights, and it's just an obliteration. So certainly a rated R, and not for the weak-hearted. Gritty, unpleasant violence. Language appropriately used, I think, and reflective of the times and the social genre that we're in. But I went to Detroit not expecting to enjoy it, which I have to say I didn't. But it's a well-made movie about a topic I had no idea, and an incident that I had no idea existed. Very well acted, very grittily shot. You asked while we were on break about shaky cam. And there certainly is shaky cam. And that annoys me as much as anything else. But I started watching it. It doesn't annoy me as much as it does you. But I started seeing what I considered to be a thought process behind that. That when we're outside the real events that are occurring, camera's pretty static. And it's easy to see. So I think it was an attempt, either by Bigelow or her cinematographer or both, to try to reflect the all of the turmoil that's going on inside there. I didn't find it terribly distracting. So overall, I thought this is a really strong, powerful film. I think we're going to see nods in many areas when you get to the Academy Awards at the end of the year. So Detroit was real powerful. Can I recommend it for a fun little time? No, but really well-made film.
So you would say that it, in a sense, it snatched and grabbed your attention?
I would say that probably so. Yes, but not maybe quite so much. See, he's working his way. As I'm talking about all these movies that he hasn't seen, he has time to think about the segues. And so in many respects, it did snatch and grab things, but not quite so much as Halle Berry's little kid did in a movie that, have we seen this before? She's a lovely little mother out having a nice, fun time with her kid, when all of a sudden he's gone. And you find out that he was the subject of one guy and looking out to, it's hard to say this because it's not the complete verb, so I'm just going to say the name of the movie is Kidnap.
Enough.
So, I think we've seen this a million times. The draw must be Halle. I think she's a wonderful actress. Would I go see a movie just because of her? Probably not. To me, and I didn't see this either, so this is a public service announcement. To me, this looks like an interesting, it looks like it's got a little bit more going on because she goes in to the police department and sees those missing, and it sounds to me like, oh, there's this whole underground world of kidnapping these kids. That it seems to me that must be what this is really about. but she has to take matters into her own hand and go save her kid. So, you know, it sounds kind of derivative. Is she strong enough? We know she's strong enough to hold a movie on her own. So I didn't see it. I think I'd be interested in watching Kidnap when it comes out on video, but I didn't get a chance to see it in the theaters this weekend.
I will, in the interest of time,
Yes.
refrain from comment on this and introduce the next film
Okay.
that neither of us saw. So, here we go. A young street magician uses his powers of prestidigitation
Gesundheit.
and enunciation to help out his young, in trouble, ailing sister with activities. If you only knew what he was doing right now. Activities that are less than legal and using his hand of sleight.
Snackbar, where we offer a wide variety of good things to eat and drink to top off your evening.
Hi.
And we're back. Just checking. Oh, what are we doing next? I don't know.
I didn't see it.
Oh, nor did I.
So?
But it looks clever. WWE, we've talked about. A strange group to come out with movies, but you know, movies can make money. But I think this takes a little interesting turn in that it looks like a silly little lighthearted kind of movie about magic, street magic. David Blaine all of a sudden gets sucked into something evil and nefarious.
You know, you think WWE Studios, and I think, oh, it's No Holds Barred too. Sadly, it's not, but
Right.
they're actually better movies. The majority of the WWE Studios films I've seen have actually not been bad. They've been
Right.
decent little thrillers, so I'm sure that's what this is. But I have no idea because I didn't see it.
So that's what's at theaters, whether you've seen it or not. I would recommend. Let's see, what would I recommend? I'd recommend The Dark Tower, maybe with some reservations. I don't know. So on to what you might get in theater, not in theaters, but on your television or on your little portable device of
on the
your
Pokemon
choice.
catching device of your choice.
Yes, exactly. I didn't know. For those of you who are in Keene, I didn't know that the Keene Library is a Pokestop. How exciting! So I'm just sitting here getting some extra Pokeballs and things like that. But moving on, however you might want to pick it up, great cast. Morgan Freeman, Alan Arkin, lots of guys who are a little troubled by the fact that they're moving on. They're getting on in age, aren't we all? The thing is that as they're trying to make ends meet and their family, they want to leave something available for their family, you got to find the little nest egg so that you can keep it around. So that, because really what they want to do when the whole thing finally does end, they want to make sure that they're going in style.
Of Oakland. We're part of the church, only our ceilings reach a little higher.
So you remember the original?
What
a surprise we're
late
doing.
78, 79, something
doing
like that.
remakes and stuff like that. I remember seeing that, and so when this came out, first of all, I'm like, really another remake, and two, that movie was really like depressing and unpleasant, and so this trailer comes out, I'm like, how strange. So I went into this with a little reservation, not knowing what to get, although I love all three of the lead actors. And Margaret she plays like a convenience store or grocery store waitress who is super sexed up and connects with Alan Arkin. I could have done without that subplot, but the rest of it I thought was really funny. I was surprised going into this by the film, I mean, at the end, because I was not expecting to like this. I was trying to think, oh, here's a bunch of old guys again complaining about being old. And I thought it was a tight, funny script. The three of them have real chemistry, so I was really surprised by going in style. And of course, I love all four of them, really. But very surprised by going in style. Enjoyed it a lot.
I cannot disagree. I saw this in the theater. I brought my parents. They loved it. I loved it. I thought it was very funny, like laugh out loud funny oftentimes. Had a really cool, funky score to it. Great soundtrack in general. It is different from the original in many ways, one of which in that it's mostly a comedy.
Yeah.
The original was Art Carney, George Burns, and Lee Strasberg, I believe.
Oh, very
and
good,
it was much more unpleasant, but it was much more of a downer, and this was just a flat comedy.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this. I would highly recommend it to folks who do or do not know the original, and it was one of my probably more fun times. I don't like a lot of comedies that I see these days. They tend to be just stupid and gross, and this wasn't. This was just fun and funny and surprising, so I liked going in style. Speaking of going in style, let me stylishly go on to introduce this next film that I also didn't see. We have an all-star cast, including, but not limited to, Emma Watson as a young woman who goes to work for a new big-time corporation, only to find that all is not what it seems, and is she in over her head working at and for the Circle.
Now through 6 p.m. Christmas Eve at Gold Circle, the amazing Christmas store.
Is there anything you'd like to tell us about the Circle?
I can tell you about this. My family and I watched this last night. No, it was a couple nights ago. Their comment, my wife's comment, was, how did this movie get made? Which I don't think it was that bad. I think in many respects, because you got some big names, Bill Paxton, as you said, Tom Hanks, Emma Watson. So big names behind this. This is essentially the internship meets the firm. So everybody, this is Google. Give me a break. This place is Google. And it very gradually, you find out that they're all nefarious machinations behind it. It's primarily about a company that has internet ties, and the real gist here, Watson comes to work for Tom Hanks, who is the CEO and owner of this company. And the big new thing is they create these little, these exist, folks, I have one myself, little basically like pin-sized cameras that are HD and everything, so you can put them up anywhere. And the concept is there's no privacy, period, anywhere ever in. And so she volunteers to do it, and she's on 24/7 with the exception of going to the bathroom. And
that's behind a paywall.
Right, and so it's quite clear after a while, and I forget the actor's name, but he plays Finn in Star Wars, and we also saw him in Detroit. He's kind of the creator of this technology.
It's John Boyega.
And is it really? I think it. Boyega, right.
First name on the cast list.
And so he comes to Watson and says, it's so surface level, the quality, the level and depth of the writing. Because he comes in, and after we see him, and he's at a party, and she sees him, and she's going to go try to find him, but he disappears. Well, I guess that's the last we're going to see of that guy, huh? No, because he finds her later and says, this is not why I made this, and you have to help me. And I could just tell from the first time I saw you that I could trust you. That's nearly the line that he gives her once. So this is very surface level, nefarious evil doings going on by a company. Throughout the entire thing, I kept wondering, is Hanks a good guy or a bad guy? Because they play it very surface, and it's not until really like 10 minutes before the movie ends that you really find out. Patton Oswalt is in this, and what a strange casting session this whole thing was. So in the long run, if you like any of them, and I do, it keeps you going. But we've seen this story a zillion times. It's very surface level, and I thought, particularly in retrospect on second viewing, that The Circle was really not very strong.
It circled the drain.
Ooh. I didn't say it.
No, who did? Not me. Who am I? Really? Popeye?
You're Mark.
And you're Tom. And we are the Cinemaniacs. Hi.
No.
Practice. So we have one more title to talk about.
Indeed.
And then if we have a lot of time, I might talk about a lot more.
Okay.
We return to an area that I know you're all fans of. If you're like me, it is actually the part of the show that I can't wait to get to, because honestly, these are the movies I kind of like more than anything else. It is the Arrow Video Corner. And Tom, sooner or later, will get an arrow right in the haunches every time. And you designed it, too. You should,
I did.
If you had to go the other way, you could have had it go right in the family area. So we have a film from the late 80s that if you're a horror fan, you know this film. If you're a horror fan, you might already own this film. But if you're a horror fan and you own this film,
you don't own this quality copy.
You don't own it like this. Let me just, okay, everybody's good time Charlie friend Jeffrey Combs stars as a man who is mad with science, blinded if you will, who creates a serum, a reagent if you will, that glows like the innards of a glow stick, because it probably was made out of the innards of a glow stick. It's used to bring things back to life that were once bereft of it. He is Herbert West, Re-Animator.
On their creepy little bones. Then pour flush remover into the monster lab and bubble lock their slab.
So that's about the level of it.
I forget. I was just saying, this is a movie when I don't see it for a while, and I don't watch it that often. But I forget how funny it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Based on more than one story of H.P. Lovecraft, or more. It's based on one book called Herbert West Re-Animator, a story, but there are other elements from other stories. It's a small cast. You have Barbara Crampton. You have Jeffrey Combs. With the
Talk
two
about
most
making
notable.
a career for somebody.
And they're still known for those movies. They both still work, and especially Combs works a lot. It's a small cast. There's only a few sets. It's a very small story. And basically, you have these two friends in college. You have Herbert West and his much more normal, non-psychotic friend, who are med students. And West develops this serum that reanimates dead tissue. So you get reanimated people, you get reanimated body parts, and in the sequels they go even crazier. Like if you recall a while ago, we reviewed Bride of Reanimator here. Arrow put that out, and now they've put out the original film in a really insane set. Like the set, I believe, is either out tomorrow or already out. I think if you pre-order it online, you probably have it. And it's like, it's a couple disc version of the movie. It's a nice new booklet with new liner notes by Mike Gingold. It's a ton of just like stuff in the set, and it's a 2-disc set. Now, I didn't have a chance to look at all of this because I'm a busy
come on,
guy.
you're slacking off.
But I was going through bits and pieces of it. First of all, as we always sing along, if you know the words, the transfer. I've never seen the movie look this good. It looks like it was very recently shot, aside from hairstyles and things like that. Looks and sounds beautiful. It has 2 or 3 audio commentaries. It has, it's one of those things with the extras. You could be watching these things for a week, and a lot of them are ported over from earlier special editions, because this is a movie that's been beloved for a long time, and various companies have had rights to it. So Arrow isn't the first person to do supplements for this. But what's great is whenever I buy a new edition of a movie I like that's had other special editions, I want this to be the last one I have to buy. I don't want to have to hold on to the old ones. And they do a really good job at digging up a lot of older interviews and older commentaries and vintage making-ofs and TV spots and trailers with new documentary features. There's like a feature-length documentary on this about the making of the film. There's one on the music. There's one on the musical that was done recently.
You know what I wish we could do, and we've got some time to talk about this, and maybe I'll give you an assignment. I wish we could contact somebody from Arrow to talk to them and ask them, because I get a sense, and you have to know, because it's a business, you have to know they must be making money off of this. But I clearly get the sense that there's a lot more going on with the way, and I don't get paid by Arrow or anything like that, and nor do you, but with the way they treat these things, because it's like they take a lover's caress to all of these films that they attack. And either you can do it or maybe I can do it, but I'm serious about trying to get a phone interview or something on with Arrow to find out why they treat things so well.
I think, like a lot of these boutique labels, and they're like one of the bigger ones now. They haven't been on the scene in this country very long.
There was Criterion before, but Criterion didn't do this stuff.
The Criterion,
to this level.
It's funny. Some people like worship Criterion, and for me, it's like, yes, they were great when they were the only game in town, but I think some of these smaller labels have far surpassed the level of thoroughness and love that Criterion does. Criterion still has great transfers, and they do nice essays. I think their covers are terrible, and all of that. But to me, for the kind of movies I like, which is what Arrow puts out, the exploitation, horror, all that stuff, I don't see anybody who can even touch them right now. So back to Reanimator. The film itself, it is extremely gory. There's a lot of nudity. It is everything a youth would want, a male youth at least, a straight male youth would want in an R-rated film. It was unrated when it was released, so it pushes beyond the boundaries of an R rating. I mean, there's nothing like pornographic in it. It's just, it's really saucy, it's really gory, and as we said several times, it's really funny. So if you like the movie, this is the best edition that has yet to be seen. Let's hope the definitive edition, maybe somebody somehow will top it when they get the triple layer Blu-rays where you can pack even more stuff on the disc.
You have to get the VR version of it and everything.
But there does come a point with extras where it's like, how much more can you put on here? Like, how many more stories are there of the making of these films? But I would hands down say this is the best version you can get of Reanimator. I will be happy to lovingly take my time going through all these extras now that I'm not trying to cram to watch it anymore. What did you think of Reanimator?
I always enjoyed it when it was out originally. Again, I think, as I recall, my memory of it as the last couple times I've seen it was, as you say, spotty VHS probably or something like that. I don't think I own the Blu-ray. I'm sure going to run right out and grab this because it is such a classic for horror films. But it stands up and as you said, I remember it as being funny, but not as funny as it was the last time I saw it, which was, 4 days ago or something like that.
I love how it's I've come up with this serum to do this thing. Let's try it. Oh, that's great. Oh no, something went wrong. And it is this domino effect of cascading. It's almost, again, like a comedy or like a Three Stooges movie. It gets more and more out of control because he did this one really stupid thing. And they're trying to contain this problem that keeps spreading and spreading. Yeah. It's almost like, in a sense, like a zombie movie, although these aren't zombies. But it is an absurd, what's the word I'm looking for? Farce of a horrifying
that's really what it is. It works as a horror movie in many respects. It's not scary. I don't recall really anything.
I think there are moments that are disturbing because of the ideas.
But it really is. I mean, clearly whoever originally made these was very familiar with actual horror movies and what they tried to do, and then they just turned it on its end. And it was, I thought it was a stunningly successful, way to do that. Just, I think anybody who likes either comedy or horror movies knows Re-Animator. So this is, at least for now, the culmination of it.
I don't want to have to buy it again. Even though I didn't have to buy this one. So Arrow, that's out now, and that's cool. We have, boy, howdy, do we have more Arrow videos to talk about in the coming weeks. I just got some today, actually. Some that you might be surprised they put out. So we both went to the movies this weekend.
We did.
And you...
I say that as a statement, not as a question. We did?
We did?
Okay.
I think we did. We both went in Pennsylvania, funny enough.
Yep.
Do you recall, and you were saying, how much was it that you paid for a matinee?
I paid, it wasn't a matinee, but it was the Thursday night opening to the Dark Tower. And I paid $13.50. So
anybody who complains about theater prices locally, $13.50.
Yep.
I believe that is what prices are at the Alamo in Yonkers that I go to, which is like almost literally, if you got a really good arm, a stone's throw from New York City. It's like almost in the city, so that's like big city prices. Although they charge less for repertory things and special events, so the prices fluctuate. You don't always pay that much. I know locally we're far below, or a bit below $13.50 right now. But like anything in life,
I believe it's $5 or6 less at the Latches Theater in Brattleboro.
Is it really?
Which is where occasionally I will go. Not that, although I do pay for my family when they attend.
For civilians, as I like to call
them.
them.
I thank them for letting me in for free.
They're our sponsors, don't you?
And you in for free.
We like them. I went to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Laheyden, Pennsylvania this weekend, as I often do. They ran a all 35mm Universal Monster Weekend.
Okay,
and it was the original Bride of Frankenstein and Wolfman on Friday night with lightning and thunder and clouds in the sky through those films, which was 4D perfect until it poured like some bitch during the last movie, and that was a little bit of a literal damper on the film. And then the next night they ran the original Mummy and the Invisible Man. Original Mummy moves like a mummy. It moves like a mummy with a bum leg.
Well, I always remember, well, when I was a kid, vampires always scared me the most. I don't know why. But I always remember the Mummy scaring me. And I'll go back and watch them now, and I'm like, why?
Well, the thing about the original, we have time. The thing about the original Karloff Mummy, the mummy's in it for like 60 seconds.
Yeah, really.
And then he's not a mummy for the rest of the movie. And I always forget that. And I'm like, not a whole lot of mummy in this Mummy movie. No titular mummy, as it were. They rectified that in the later films because it was just a mummy dragging his leg and trying to kill people. But yeah, that first one's pretty slow and creaky.
Now remind me, in Bride of Frankenstein, was that the one where toward the end there's this big pit and a little kid gets thrown into the pit?
I don't believe it's Bride.
Oh, okay.
It might be one of the other ones.
Okay,
it's been a while since I've seen them all. It was so those were really cool. Invisible Man, I love. He is a maniac, and it is a pretty dark movie.
Well, nobody will get it when like I'll be sitting at the theater and there's an empty seat next to me, and is anyone sitting there? And I say, yeah, that's Claude Rains. Nobody gets it, so
they just back away slowly, and you get the row to yourself.
Right, exactly, because they think you're nuts.
And Sunday night, I went to the Alamo Yonkers and saw the director's cut of Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America, which is a film I'd always heard about. I'd always seen the old big Warner Brothers clamshell, big wide tube VHS set because it's like a 4-hour movie.
It's always super hyped.
And it's super hyped. And I had seen Once Upon a Time in the West there last weekend, which I love that movie.
Great movie.
So great. I didn't like Once Upon a Time in America as much. I thought it was really well made, and it reminded me, which came later, Boardwalk Empire. One of the things I loved about that show was it felt like you were looking into a window in the past. It felt real. It's like that's what it looked like back then. And this felt like a very real world you could step into, this turn of the century or 20s, 30s, 40s Brooklyn area. And I was watching it near the area where it was set, so that was kind of cool. amazing cast. I mean, De Niro's up front and center, but a lot of people who would go on to be more famous, a lot of bit players. Jennifer Connelly as a kid is in that. And that was part of the fun, is seeing all these faces you recognize. And it was, I didn't realize that it bopped around in time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was, I don't know when Leone was planning to start the film, but it felt very informed by Godfather 2, shall we say.
Yes, I will agree with that.
And maybe a pinch of Bugsy Malone.
I always found it to be a little bit slow, too.
That did not bother me. The length was never an issue for me yesterday.
I don't mean slow.
I really liked it.
Well, I just meant draggy. I just thought, come on, get on. And even in retrospect, because obviously now, films are so different even 10 years ago than they are now. We can't stand for a shot to be longer than 2 seconds, but even so.
That's something I liked about Once Upon a Time in America and luxuriated in a wide shot of this amazingly recreated, back room of a gambling hall or something. It was just a wide shot where you could just take in all the details. It's like, people work really hard on these movies. It's nice when you actually show the audience what they do and not just go, so I thought that was really interesting. It was the director's cut, which had some footage reinstated into it that was from a much more inferior source, and you can really tell. Like, it looks like it is so inferior and strange looking, and you could tell they worked really hard to make it look as good as it did.
Okay.
That it almost looks like it's an effect, like it's some kind of hazy memory effect. It was very weird.
Were those like just all of a sudden the shots like that, or an entire scene?
It would be.
That's funny.
Like the beginning of a scene would
Were
be
you
like that.
aware of that before you went in?
I talked to a friend about it, and he had the Blu-ray or the DVD, and he said you can tell when it switches, and you could tell when it switched. But anyway, it was really nice to see that. And if you like gangster films or films about ye olde America, or films with just a good amount of nudity in them, Once Upon a Time in America is good. But I would recommend Once Upon a Time in the West more because it has the Pistoliers. Anyway, that's about all we have time for this week. Next week we will be back with more discussion and probably not an incredible ton of movies to talk about. So we'll jibber jabber.
Depending on how many you give us.
So we'll do 45 minutes on the first movie.
Yeah.
And then 3 minutes rest for each of the rest one. Until then, I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.